Hi, this is Mr. Congo from AltChar.com, and I'm here to talk you through our preview play of Civilization 6 Gathering Storm, with a big thank you to the people at 2K Games UK for providing us with a preview copy. It's impossible to talk about the new expansion to Civilization 6, Civilization 6 Gathering Storm, without at least some reference to the other climate, the contemporary political one. And much is alluded to in the new title. These are dangerous waters by which to stand. We live in a world in which the current US president takes pride in joking on Twitter about global warming being a cure for the polar vortex parts of the US are seeing at the moment. A tweet almost immediately undermined by the US National Weather Service, pointing out in their own tweet that climate change does indeed produce such phenomena. Well, these are the times in which we live. Although any Civ player worth their victory conditions will know these are the times humans have always lived in. Chaos, fear, and the possession of power are our drivers as much as discovery, improvement, and harmony. One set requires the other, yin and yang, if you will. And so, Civilization 6 Gathering Storm brings the power of the natural world, and also the disruption of it, into the game in a way never seen before in the entire series. Does it work? Well, yeah, we think so. In the early and mid game, those volcanic eruptions, droughts, storms, floods, and hurricanes that are now in Civilization 6 bring a considerable new challenge to gameplay, as well as advantages on which to capitalise. For the record, we played 2 full games at Prince level, standard speed, with the environmental effects slider maxed in both out of 4 settings available. Our usual difficulty setting in Civ 6 Rise and Fall would be Emperor, so well and not among maybe the elite of players, we're not a bad player either. Now, the key thing brought about by the new environmental effects is variety. A flood, for example, can set back your population growth plans, or having a unit moving to attack suddenly badly damaged in a volcanic eruption again can put your plans awry. It brings a welcome element of unpredictability, an added factor in your city location and zone planning. Sometimes the risk is worth the reward, and sometimes not. That sweet volcanic soil will give you a boost post-eruption. However, by Zeus, that tectonic pimple will blow again. Some things, such as flooding, can be mitigated by building dams or even flood barriers. And the Governor Liang has an ability that provides city with protection from such environmental catastrophes. The later game climate change mechanic works for us too. Well, when I say it works, in our 2 playthroughs we were probably largely following strategies that work for us in Rise and Fall, with some exceptions for the new mechanics, but by doing so we found ourselves the chief offender when it came to global pollution. And when I say chief offender, I mean we were Al Capone and everyone else was just guilty of minor traffic offences. We were pumping out CO2 like a herd of Texas Longhorns on a diet of beans for breakfast, lunch and dinner, if you know what I mean. So that made us the bad guys, right? Well, that's just the price of innovation, my friends, being on the cutting edge of technology. Now, obviously, this global warming situation can be mitigated further into the game as technologies such as wind farms and solar plants become available. And there are also city projects such as carbon capture. Now, carbon capture may be a controversial choice of idea for some, as it's a method that arguably has never been successful on certainly a global scale. Anyway, that's an argument that's outside the scope of a game review, but it does give you an idea of the territory on which Gathering Storm walks. So, the primary cost of this environmental damage, human-caused environmental damage, is rising sea levels. CO2 is a primary driver of ice cap loss in Gathering Storm, and hence rising sea levels. Interesting, there are indicators in-game to give you an idea of the vulnerability of coastal or plains tiles to such flooding. In this respect, and looking at all the environmental effects, we describe Gathering Storm as a game of informed risk, and that's an important concept to get. However, equally, you can turn the environmental effects slider down to 1 and ignore most of it. But we do prefer our metal heavy. Thank you very much. Is there an environmental message from the game's designers in all this? Well, clearly there is, and it's one that may cause rancour in some political circles. It is, however, based on our current scientific understanding, and that's a scientific understanding that is drawn from measurable effects. But Civ is Civ, and it all left us wondering if we could deliberately flood the Netherlands if we were playing against it. Of course, a Dutch person would tell you they're precisely the wrong people to pick on with flooding, although people in Nepal might argue that their strategy is somewhat better. The other biggest change Gathering Storm brings to Civilization 6 is the World Congress. Ah yes, I hear you Civ veterans mumble. For us it's just a welcome return. Well, and it really bloody is. The primary currency for the World Congress is diplomatic favour, and that's a really important currency. Be awash with the stuff and you can manipulate those World Congress votes to your major advantage. Be a pauper in it and you'll be on the wrong end of the schemes of others. World Congress votes happen on a cyclical basis, so every 30 turns on standard speed, with automatically generated resolutions to vote for and against on, with an added level of detail in that you'll be asked to specify which resource, building type, city-state type, civ, individual civ is affected, positively or negatively. Those votes cost diplomatic favour. Did we just say goats instead of votes? I think I did. Obviously goats might be a viable exchange for votes in some parts of the world, but no, we meant votes. So how is this diplomatic favour earned? Well, through alliances for one, and it is really better to have some buddies in Gathering Storm, but more of that later. Suzerainty of city-states, completing global challenges such as the World's Fair. Yeah, the World's Fair's back. And other things such as simply trading diplomatic favour. And it's a pretty desirable commodity. Those AIs will make all kinds of offers to obtain yours, trust me. And think carefully about those offers is all I'll say. It can also be used to extract promises directly from other civs via the Ask for Promise button, with obviously consequences for breaking promises. Now, special sessions of the World Congress are called in the event of an emergency, and you can vote on whether these emergencies go ahead or not. So emergencies also now include intervention in environmental catastrophes, that is sending help to the affected civ. And through those special sessions, it's really good fun to be able to vote on an emergency when you're the target, having taken someone's city and everyone's, oh my god, what's he done? If you've got enough diplomatic favour, you can say, nothing to see here, guys, just vote it down. And again, that's a nice bit of depth and complexity. And that leads us neatly into the new Grievance System. Oh, what sunlit uplands are these? Now, as we all know, the previous warmongering system in Civ 6 was pretty rubbish. What the designers seem not to have understood is that Civ players don't forget. So I don't care if the Egyptians attacked me 1,000 years ago. I'm waiting for the day I can take revenge, and that is a revenge I will take. Yet with warmongering, if say another civ caused your people to be taken as slaves and your women to be in a state of considerable lamentation for some time, if you later so much as chucked a cabbage at them, warmonger, everyone labelled you a warmonger. So most of us just ended up wearing it as a badge of honour, regardless of the game mechanics. Well, this sorry state of affairs is over. It's been replaced with the Grievance System. This, in effect, gives points for and against all civs in a game concerning their dealings with each other, and also concerning dealings with allies, generated by hostile acts such as invasions, breaking promises, denying requests, and so on. Grievance points act as a plus-minus with each civ and are visible on the diplomacy screen. This has the desirable outcome of eliminating the kind of domino effect the warmongering system so often brought about, where, like the English football club Millwall, everyone hates us and we don't care. Grievance points also seem to have an effect on the loyalty mechanic of other cities. So if you're trying to affect loyalty in your direction, if the civ you're plotting against has lots of grievances against you, it'll take a lot to convince the people in the city that you're a good guy, and that's a really nice touch. It brings an element of real world reality to the game. Of course, you can still end up with everybody hating you, but it's a far more complex and we'd say manipulable process. So if they do, it's your own fault this time. Got it? We're also getting an entire new era, and this is really important. One of the major issues with Civilization 6 has been the endgame. Partly we feel this is a result of the actual game type. In such a strategy game that can take tens of hours to complete, it becomes apparent you've won before you've actually won, or you've lost for that matter. In essence, and in our experience and the experience of other Civ players we know, it leads to a situation of boredom, where you're pressing that next turn button out of a sense of duty rather than enjoyment. And we'd go far as to guess that 75% of Civ 6 games are never actually finished to an actual victory. We've asked that question on Reddit, and the responses we got suggested that was the case. Well, the new future era brings randomly selected new technologies, random new civics, and 3 new government types. So in effect, the finish line of the game has been moved, and the scenery along the way made much more interesting. Does it work? Well, we're only going off 2 complete standard speed playthroughs. One as the Inca, which was immense fun incidentally, and one as the Ottomans. We'd say it works to some extent. Our games were admittedly conducted with an intensity we don't normally play Civ 6 at in order to meet deadlines for this preview. So personally, I think we need maybe a dozen more relaxed playthroughs at a higher difficulty to be conclusive. So watch this space for that and some assessment of the individual new civs in the game. Oh, speaking of the future, giant death robots are back, incidentally, for the veterans among us, and they're pretty good fun. In Gathering Storm, the concept of resource consumption has been introduced. So instead of simply requiring 1 or 2 copies of a resource for a particular unit, you now accumulate that resource over turns if you have access to it. So by way of illustration, you can end up with 150 iron or 50 horses if you don't actually use them. And that makes trading, again, more interesting and more considered. And again, it's an improvement to detailed play. Power is now also an element in the game. Your advanced cities will display a small vault icon on their titles as the game moves into later eras. And power can be used to improve the performance of late game buildings, but involves using resources such as uranium, coal, oil, and guess what? There's an environmental impact to that. Although solar, geothermal, wind power, offshore wind farms, they do become available later too. Interesting, we had a nuclear plant meltdown on us because we ignored the recommission nuclear plant button. Don't ignore the recommission nuclear plant button. It leads to glowy green stuff polluting the hell out of your cities. Call the workers for a clean up. Yes, that's right, son, it's a one-off contract. Now put on that mask. There are a bunch of other improvements in Gathering Storm that we'd put into the quality of life category, and this is significant. Bigger resource icons for starters. Archaeological sites being clearly marked once you have an active archaeologist. We most welcome the return of 2 things from previous titles in the series. The production queue for cities, allowing you to pre-plan up to 8 build orders, and also the city reports. Oh God, how we've missed the city reports. Once again, we can see the status of all our cities in one place with yields, resources, status, population status. It's a small thing really, but leaving it out of Civ 6 was like, for us, designing a car and forgetting the wheel nuts. So map filters or lenses are better in Gathering Storm 2. For example, the Empire lens gives you a much better sense of borders and the relative strengths of competing civs in a way not available just by looking at the scores in the relevant areas. We're certain the game has been optimised too, even running with a full roster of AI civs in the endgame. Response times on our mid to high end spec PC were great, much better than in Rise and Fall. So you're getting new world wonders too, new natural wonders, some new general units such as Mr. Death Robot mentioned above, and 9 new leaders with 8 new civs. Did we say the Incas were great fun? To you, that might be a mountain. To them, it's an opportunity. All this promises some great added variation and detailing in gameplay for Gathering Storm. So what reservations do we have? Well, we're not a fan of tall gameplay, that is fewer larger cities as opposed to more smaller ones. But we do know a good number of players are fans of that style. And we see nothing in Gathering Storm that makes the tall style more viable. We also fail to see the utility in putting your population into buildings as opposed to working resources. This has always been the case with Civ 6, so much so that most players ignore the possibility of even doing so. Which is a shame because the mechanic is there and it's not really effective. It should be, obviously, as as you move into later eras, the buildings become more important and working the land less, if you were looking at it in historical terms, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, this is based on 2 playthroughs, so it's not an opinion that has been tested to complete destruction or evidence though. In summary, Gathering Storm, which launches on February the 14th, delivers a lot. It's a powerful evolution of the current game, whether you play vanilla or Rise and Fall. The World Congress adds an element that was sorely missing. The environmental mechanics make for much more variety and consideration in your gameplay, that all-important element of risk and uncertainty. Diplomacy's better. The Grievance System brings a whole area of the game back into relevance. So we think the guys at Firaxis have got this about right. Is it the perfection of Civilization 6? Well, at least one of our jurors is still out on that. But we do intend to play the hell out of it. And that very fact is quite enough praise.